I am a 58-year-old man, and this is the story I never imagined I would ever share with anyone. It is a story that sat inside my chest for years like a quiet bruise that never healed. Even now, as I speak it out loud, I feel a strange weight rising from memories that should have stayed buried but refused to stay silent. I remember the exact moment everything changed. I can still picture the hallway of our old family house, the faded wallpaper, the wooden floor that creaked under every step, the afternoon sunlight spilling through the long narrow window with dust floating in the warm air. And I remember standing there frozen, while my mother looked straight at me with eyes that felt colder than winter rain. She held an old jewelry box in her hands and said something that cut deeper than any blade could ever cut. She said, "This jewelry is for real family." The sound of those words hit me so hard I felt my breath stop for a second. It was like someone pulled the ground from under my feet. I stood there trying to force my brain to understand if she truly meant what I thought she meant. If she truly believed that, after 58 years of living under her roof, helping her, working for her, supporting her through every storm that comes with life, I was somehow not part of the real family she believed she had. The hallway felt smaller that day, like the walls were closing in on me. I could hear the distant ticking of the clock in the living room, but it sounded slower, heavier, like time itself was confused by what was happening. I felt something rise inside me, something painful and hot at the same time. A feeling that made me want to ask her, "Who am I then? If not your son, then who am I?" But the words stuck in my throat. She did not look away. She did not blink. She just pressed her hand against that box, as if guarding it from me, as if I was some outsider who had no right to touch it. That moment became the spark that changed everything. I did not know it then, but it was the moment that cracked open a truth that had been buried under lies and secrets for decades. It was the moment that made me question everything I knew about my life, my mother, my brothers, my place in the world. And it was the moment that planted a quiet revenge inside me, not the loud kind, not the kind that destroys things in fiery anger. This was the slow kind, the heavy kind, the kind that grows in silence and waits patiently until the truth finally rises. My name is Walter Green. I lived almost 60 years believing I understood my family, believing I was the oldest son, the dependable one, the one who carried the weight of the house on his shoulders, the one who worked 2 jobs when money was tight, the one who fixed whatever broke, the one who stepped forward every time my father could not stand up tall enough. I believed I belonged. I believed I mattered. But I learned that a person can live their whole life inside a home and still be treated like a stranger the moment greed steps into the room. The heirloom she held that day was not just jewelry. It was a symbol of everything they thought they could hide from me, a symbol of every lie they whispered behind closed doors, a symbol of every time they wanted something but did not want to share it with me. And I want you to understand something important. Nothing in this story is what it first seems. Not the mother I trusted since childhood, not the brothers I loved and protected for decades, not the memories I grew up believing were real, and certainly not the truth I found buried deep under years of silence and manipulation. That truth did not reveal itself all at once. It revealed itself slowly, piece by piece, like someone pulling old nails out of a locked door one by one, until the door finally swings open and everything hidden inside comes pouring out into the light. I stand here now ready to open that door fully. I want you to hear every detail, because this story is more than betrayal. It is more than pain. It is about discovery, about reclaiming the identity I almost lost, about understanding the difference between being part of a family and being used by one. And it all began with a single sentence from my mother. She said the jewelry was for real family. And in that moment I realized I was about to uncover a truth that would change everything I thought I knew about who I was.
I grew up in a small American town where every person knew the sound of every porch screen door and the name of every dog that ran through the streets. It was the kind of place where people waved from their yards and sat on old wooden chairs in the evening just to talk about the heat or the rain, or who bought the big house near the edge of town. Life moved slow there. Slow enough for a child to think the world was a safe place. Slow enough for me to believe that my family was simple and honest and strong. But looking back now, I can see that even the calmest places hide storms that no one speaks of. My family was made of 5 people: a hardworking father who woke before sunrise every day of his life, a mother who spoke softly but carried something sharp behind her eyes that I only noticed years later, and 2 younger brothers who followed every word that came out of her mouth as if it was some kind of rule that could never be questioned. Then there was me, Walter Green, the oldest one, the one who learned early that when something broke in the house, it was my hands that fixed it. When someone fell behind in chores, it was my shoulders that carried the weight. When the family had no money for groceries, it was me walking home after school with tired feet because I spent my evenings stocking shelves for a few dollars. I never expected anything in return. I was raised to believe that a family works together, that you do what you can for each other without asking why. I told myself I did all that work because it kept the peace in the house. But peace can be a tricky thing. It can sit on the surface looking gentle and safe until the day you realize it was only a thin layer covering something darker under it. A quiet storm, a hidden truth, a crack in the foundation that no one noticed because everyone was too busy pretending the walls were solid. As the years went by, I never once questioned my place in that house. I never questioned why I was the one who stood between my brothers when they fought, or why I was the one my father leaned on when life got too much for him. I never questioned why my mother rarely showed the same softness to me that she showed to my brothers. I just thought I was older. I thought older meant stronger. I thought stronger meant less affection, less attention, less room for mistakes. I told myself this is what responsibility feels like. This is what being the oldest means. I carried that belief for decades without knowing that I was living inside a story that was never fully told to me. When I turned 50, everything shifted. My father passed away. It felt like the whole town went silent that day. He had been the heart of the house, the steady one, the only person who never made me question my worth. He raised me with firm hands but kind eyes. He taught me how to stand tall even when life pushed hard. Losing him felt like losing the only anchor I ever had. After he was gone, the weight of the entire house fell on me again, just like when I was a young boy. Bills lay on the table untouched. Arrangements needed to be made. Papers needed to be signed. And once again my brothers stepped aside as if they were guests, not family. They looked at me and said, "Mother told us Walter will handle it. He is good at this. He is used to it." They said it with no shame, no worry, no sense of duty. My mother sat in her old rocking chair with her hands folded on her lap and her eyes staring at nothing. I thought she was grieving. I thought she was tired. I thought she was carrying heartache. But now when I look back at that moment, I can see that her silence was not grief. It was something colder. Something she did not want to say out loud, something she hoped I would never discover. After the funeral, the house felt different. The air felt heavier. The rooms felt smaller. My father's absence felt like a shadow stretching across every wall. I tried to hold everyone together the way I always did, but nothing I said made a difference. It was like my presence no longer mattered, like the glue I had been for years was no longer needed now that the person who relied on that glue was gone. Then one quiet afternoon, my mother called me into her bedroom. She sat on the edge of her bed like she was waiting for something important to happen. She opened her old wooden drawer slowly and took out a small box wrapped in soft brown cloth. She held it with both hands like it was a piece of her own heart. I stood near the door waiting for her to speak. She looked at me for a long moment, a long, cold moment. Then she said, "This will go to real family. You do not need to worry about it." Her voice carried no warmth. It was flat, firm, empty. I felt something sharp rise through my chest, a strange heat, a feeling that made the room tilt for a second. I asked her, "What do you mean by real family?" She moved her eyes away from me. She stared at the wall like the truth was written there. She said, "You know what I mean." Then she closed the drawer with a soft thud that echoed in my head for days. I walked out of her room trying to breathe steady, trying to make sense of her words, but nothing made sense. That was the first time I felt something slipping, something important, something that held my place in that house. It felt like sand slipping between my fingers, slow, quiet, but impossible to stop. It was the first sign that the life I believed in for 50 years was not built on truth. It was built on secrets, and those secrets were about to break everything I thought I knew. Days moved like heavy clouds, slow and suffocating, and yet every one of them carried the same echo of her words following me everywhere I went. Real family. I tried to pretend those words hadn't pierced me, tried to convince myself they were harmless, that maybe I misunderstood, that maybe she was anxious or tired or simply having one of her cold days. But something inside me kept scratching, digging, refusing to let me rest. A thought that started small, like a whisper, but kept growing until it felt like a scream inside my chest. Something was off. Something had been off for a long, long time, and I had never allowed myself to see it. I found myself watching everyone more closely. My mother, my brothers, the rhythm of the house, the corners where secrets liked to hide. And the more I watched, the more I realized something was shifting behind my back. It was in the way conversations fell silent the moment I walked into a room. It was in the way my brothers' eyes darted around like guilty children, as if they were scared I'd catch them saying what they weren't supposed to. It was the strange tension in the air whenever the topic of family history came up, a tension so thick it felt like walking through cold fog. Then there were the papers. I didn't know what they were, not at first, but I started noticing the pattern. A rustle of pages, my mother's sharp turn of the head, the way she'd flatten a file with her palm, push it under an old cushion, or slide it into the drawer by her chair as soon as she heard my footsteps in the hall. She thought she was being subtle, but subtlety disappears when someone is being watched by the very son they're hiding from. And then the whispering, that was the part that finally made something inside me snap. One late afternoon, I heard my brothers outside in the backyard. Their laughter drifted through the open window, sharp, careless, and light, the kind of laughter that belongs to people who believe the world bends to them. I stepped closer out of habit, not even intending to eavesdrop, but their words stopped me cold. "He still thinks he's the oldest in this family," one of them said, mocking, cruel in a way he'd never sounded before. "The poor fool," the other one replied. "Mother will never tell him. Why would she? It will only make him angry." I remember stepping back like I'd been shoved. My whole body tightened, my jaw locked, my fingers curled into fists without me even thinking about it. Angry? Why should I be angry unless there was something terrible to be angry about? Something they knew, something they had all talked about without me. I didn't confront them. I couldn't. I felt too hollow, too stunned. My brothers had always been childish, sometimes selfish, but this was different. This was knowledge. This was intent. This was a secret they were comfortable laughing about. I walked away with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. A storm brewed inside me. Anger, confusion, dread, all mixed into a heavy knot I couldn't swallow. For days after that, nothing felt normal. Every sound in the house felt like it was hiding something. Every word felt half-spoken, carefully chosen, like everyone was walking on a path they didn't want me to follow. And the more they tried to keep me away, the more I felt pulled toward the truth like a man standing near the edge of a cliff, unable to turn back. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. One evening, I sat down beside my mother. She was knitting, her hands moving with slow, practiced motion, her eyes fixed on the loop of yarn as if the pattern mattered more than anything else in the world. I waited for her to look at me. She didn't. So I spoke. "Mother," I said quietly, "if there is something you need to tell me, this is the time." Her hands stopped moving, but she still didn't look at me. I saw her swallow. I saw her jaw tighten. She took a breath, slow and shaky, like she needed to steady herself before letting anything out. Then she said, "Walter, you always had a place here." I thought there would be more. I waited. The silence stretched until the air felt thin. But not every place is meant to be permanent. The moment she said that, something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, not in a way anyone could hear, but I felt it. A small, quiet breaking, like a branch snapping inside my chest. Her voice wasn't angry, it wasn't cold, it was resigned, final, as if she had already grieved something about me long before I knew anything was wrong. I stared at her, my heart beating so slowly it hurt. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but none of them would leave my throat. I wanted to yell, demand answers, demand truth, but every muscle in my body felt too heavy. That was when I knew, truly knew, that whatever secret they were hiding wasn't small. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't about jewelry. It wasn't about family roles or old baggage or petty resentment. It was bigger, much bigger. It was about me, about who I was, about who they believed I was. And the worst part wasn't the anger or the fear. It was the betrayal, the quiet one, the one that sits deep inside your bones and changes the way the world feels around you. The betrayal that tells you nothing you believed, your childhood, your place, your identity, was as solid as you thought it was. That night, as I sat alone in my room, repeating her words over and over like a curse. Not every place is meant to be permanent. I knew this was just the beginning. Something was coming. Something that had lived in the shadows for decades. Something that was about to come crashing into the light, whether my family wanted it or not. It happened on a cold evening, the kind of evening where even the sky seemed exhausted, hanging low and gray like it was carrying a burden too heavy to hold for another day. The wind outside scraped across the windows, restless and impatient, as if it already knew something inside this house was about to snap open, something dark that had been locked away for decades. The whole place felt uneasy. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. My brothers were in the living room when I walked in. They both turned their heads, but their faces shifted too quickly, like they were rearranging their expressions into something else, something neutral, something that didn't belong to them naturally. Their voices had gone still. Their bodies stiffened. I knew instantly that whatever they were discussing had everything to do with me. My mother sat in her old wooden chair in the corner, the same chair she'd rocked in when we were children. But this time she wasn't rocking, she wasn't moving at all. On her lap sat the jewelry box, the same one she had snatched away from me like it was some sacred treasure I had no right to touch. She wasn't holding it gently, she was gripping it, her fingers curled tight around the lid, almost as if she thought I might try to take it again. Her knuckles had turned pale from the pressure. She looked up only when she sensed me standing there, but her eyes didn't hold the warmth a mother's should. Instead, they were filled with something I had never seen before. Fear, maybe, or guilt, or the weight of something she had carried too long. She looked from me to my brothers, then back to me, then away again, like she was searching for someone else to speak first, someone to deliver the blow she didn't have the strength to deliver herself. My youngest brother cleared his throat. He looked at our mother. She nodded, barely the smallest motion, but enough for him to understand that it was his turn to say what she refused to. He shifted forward, elbows on his knees, and when he spoke, his voice didn't carry any sympathy or hesitation. It was sharp, blunt, almost rehearsed. "You are not our blood, Walter." The words hung in the air like ash after an explosion, silent, thick, suffocating. For a moment I didn't understand them. I heard them, but they didn't register. They sat there, floating in front of me like a sentence written in a language I had forgotten how to read. And then, slowly, painfully, the meaning settled in. He continued, his tone strangely calm, as if he had been waiting for the chance to say this. "Mother said you were never supposed to know, but now you do. The jewelry belongs to real family, so it goes to us, not you." I didn't blink, I didn't move. I just stood there, suddenly aware of the weight of my own heartbeat, each thud echoing like footsteps inside an empty hall. For a few seconds I genuinely forgot to breathe. The room spun, not fast, just slowly, like a carousel you can't get off even though it makes you sick. My hands turned cold, my throat closed. Everything, The walls, the furniture, the lights, blurred around the edges. Not our blood. Real family. Not you. It was like the universe decided to flip my life upside down with one sentence. I finally managed to speak, but my voice didn't sound like mine. It came out broken, weak, like someone else had climbed inside my body and was trying to talk through a cracked window. Where did you hear that? Both of them looked at each other, almost casually, like two people discussing what to eat for dinner. My older brother shrugged, pointed at our mother with his chin. She told us a long time ago, he said. Years, actually. She said you were taken in out of pity. That word pity hit me so hard I thought my legs might give out. I had been called many things in my life, but never that. That word felt like someone reached inside my chest and squeezed my heart with their bare hands. Pity. Like I was some stray animal they fed out of obligation. Like I didn't earn my place in the family. Like I should be grateful they even let me stay. I turned to my mother, waiting, hoping for her to deny it. To say my brothers misunderstood. To say they were lying, exaggerating, twisting something innocent. Anything. I just needed one word from her to prove what I had known all my life wasn't collapsing right in front of me. But she didn't say anything. She didn't even try. She sat there, quiet as stone, staring down at the jewelry box like she wanted to disappear inside it. Her silence was louder than any confession. Her silence confirmed the truth better than any words could have. In her silence, I heard every lie she ever told me. Every moment she let me believe something that wasn't real. Every time she called me son, knowing she didn't mean it the same way she meant it for them. My voice trembled. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Why did you let me grow up believing I belonged here? She didn't lift her head. She didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she whispered, barely audible. It would have changed everything. I felt something inside me collapse quietly, like a structure that had been weak for years finally giving up. Changed everything. Everything had already changed. Everything I thought I knew. My childhood memories, the fights, the celebrations, the love, the trust. It all cracked apart in a single moment. My brothers were watching me, not with empathy but with the satisfaction of people who finally said the thing they'd been holding onto like a weapon. And my mother, she just sat there, letting the truth bleed out like it wasn't a wound she caused, like she wasn't tearing down the life she built for me. What hurt the most wasn't the revelation. It wasn't even the words. It was the feeling that they had lived comfortably with this secret while I lived in ignorance, that they whispered behind my back, that they laughed about it, that they treated my identity, my entire existence, as some private joke shared among themselves while I walked around believing a lie they constructed. In that moment, betrayal didn't feel like a single event. It felt like a lifetime. It felt like every smile, every hug, every moment of trust was suddenly poisoned. It felt like they had slowly carved away pieces of me over the years and only now bothered to tell me why. And as I stood there, staring at the three people I spent my whole life loving, a cold truth settled into my bones. I wasn't losing my family. They had never allowed me to be part of it in the first place. I walked out of that house feeling like someone had stacked a mountain on my chest and told me to carry it alone. The night air felt colder than usual, sharp enough to sting my skin as I climbed into my truck. I did not drive far. I just pulled into the empty church parking lot down the road and sat there with the engine off and the darkness wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. I stared at the cracked windshield for what felt like hours, trying to breathe past the tightness in my throat. I thought about everything I had ever done for that family. The endless nights of overtime jobs so my brothers could go to school without wearing embarrassment on their backs. The times I stayed awake until dawn holding that house together while my mother slept peacefully in her room. The nights I patched up broken fences, paid overdue bills with money I needed for myself, defended her when neighbors whispered, protected her reputation more fiercely than I protected my own future. And all this time I was nothing more than a charity case to her, a shadow she let into the house, a placeholder, a story she never planned to tell right. A man raised on lies and told to accept whatever scraps were given to him. The longer I sat there, the heavier the anger grew, but it wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was quiet, slow, cold, the kind of anger that settles deep and becomes something steady, something controlled, something that does not burn out but waits. I am not the kind of man who breaks apart in the storm. I am the kind of man who studies the storm, who watches the wind, who learns the pattern, who waits for the exact moment when the storm forgets he is still there. And then I remembered something small, something buried so deep in my memory that it came back only because I needed it. I remembered my father standing with me outside near the shed when I was maybe 15. He told me if anything ever goes wrong, look inside the attic, not the bedroom one, the old outdoor attic, the one your mother never goes near, the one with the rusted lock and the wooden steps that creak like old bones. At the time, I thought he was just being dramatic. He used to say strange things when he wanted me to feel important. But now that memory flickered in my mind like a spark catching fire in the dark. And that spark turned into a light bright enough to lead me out of the sadness and into something sharper, something more focused, something that smelled a lot like truth and justice. The next morning before the sun came up, I drove back to the house. My brothers were asleep. My mother was probably sitting in her room holding that jewelry box like it was a shield. The house was silent, too silent. I moved quickly and quietly around the side yard where the old attic stood. The lock was still there, but age had softened it. I pulled until it snapped loose. The wooden ladder groaned under my weight as if it had been waiting years to carry someone again. When I opened the attic door, the cold air hit me hard. It was nearly freezing up there. The sunlight slipped through a tiny crack in the roof, making dust float around like tiny snowflakes trapped in time. Everything smelled like old wood and forgotten years. I moved slowly, pushing aside boxes filled with old blankets, furniture legs, broken tools, and things I had not seen since childhood. Then I found it, a small wooden crate in the far corner. It looked ordinary at first, but when I lifted it, I felt something shift inside, something heavier than papers, something that carried more truth than any voice in that house ever had. My hands shook as I dragged it toward the light. Inside the crate was an envelope with my father's handwriting on the front. His handwriting was unmistakable, bold, strong. The letters leaned forward like he wrote them with purpose. My throat tightened so hard I had to sit down on an old trunk before opening it. The moment I tore the envelope open, my breath stopped. Inside were documents, not just birth papers, not just signatures, but a full story my mother had buried under lies and silence. The first paper was my birth certificate, not a copy, the original one. My father's signature rested at the bottom, bold, clear, real. I traced it with my fingertip like it was a memory coming back to life. I sat there staring at it until the cold from the attic floor crept up my spine. Then I found something else. Another paper, this one older, yellow on the edges. It explained everything. It told the truth my mother had hidden for more than 50 years. I learned that my mother had been married before my father met her. Married young. Married to a man who left her with nothing but worry and shame. When my father stepped in, he not only married her but also took responsibility for everything she brought with her. He tried to give her a fresh start, a safe life, a stable home. But the paper went deeper. It revealed that my mother was already pregnant with me when she met my father. She told him the baby was from a man she did not want to talk about. She said she wanted to forget the past. My father believed her. He took me in as his own. He signed the papers. He raised me without ever making me feel like anything less than his child. And that was not all. The last page in the envelope was a letter. My father had written it in shaky handwriting near the end of his life. It told me things he never had the courage to say out loud. He wrote that he always loved me, that in his heart I was his real son, that blood meant nothing if the soul claimed you as family, He said he kept the papers hidden because my mother insisted on burying the truth. She feared people would judge her. She feared losing control of the household. She feared losing her reputation. And worst of all, she feared I would love him more than I loved her. He wrote, "I knew one day the truth would matter to you. If you are reading this, then my silence has ended, and hers no longer holds power." I sat there in the attic with the envelope in my hands and 1,000 emotions rushing through me like waves crashing on a stormy shore. Hurt, anger, sadness, relief, and something new, something sharp and steady. Purpose. In that moment, I understood something important. My mother did not push me away because I was not her blood. She pushed me away because I reminded her of a past she wanted to erase. And my brothers believed her because she raised them in the comfort of her own version of the truth. But now I had something they did not. The real truth. The truth my father trusted me to find. The truth that lived in those papers. The truth that could turn their world upside down with nothing more than a single sentence spoken at the right time. The truth that would make every lie my mother told collapse like a house built on soft sand. I walked out of that attic with the envelope under my coat and something new beating in my chest. Something calmer than rage. Something sharper than anger. A plan. A plan built not to destroy but to reveal. A plan that would not hurt anyone physically but would expose every lie they hid from me. A plan that would make them see the truth with their own eyes. A plan they could not run from or twist or cover with fresh stories. This was no longer about the jewelry box. This was about reclaiming my name, my identity, my place, my truth. The truth waited in the dark for years, but now it was in my hands, and I would use it with the same steady strength my father used when he wrote his last words to me. They took my belonging from me. Now I was going to take back the truth they tried to bury. I sat there in that cold attic with the papers trembling in my hands, and it felt like the whole world had shifted under me. The air around me was thick and still, almost as if the truth itself had weight and was settling slowly onto my shoulders. Dust floated through the thin ray of morning light that slipped through the cracked roof, and for a moment everything felt suspended in time. I stared down at my father's handwriting, the simple strokes he made with the pen, every line steady and sure, the letters clear even after all those years. It was almost like he was sitting beside me again, speaking the words himself, guiding me through the storm he knew would one day reach me. The letter was long but written in the plain, honest way my father always spoke. He was never a man for fancy talk or complicated sentences. He always believed that the truth should never need decoration. As I read the first line again, my eyes stung with a kind of emotion I had buried deep inside since the day he passed. He wrote that I was his first child, and nothing could change that truth. He wrote that from the moment he held me, he knew he wanted to raise me as his own. He said he loved me with the same strength and pride he carried in his chest every day he worked to keep our family fed. He told me that my mother sometimes had her own ways of twisting stories, especially when she felt cornered or afraid, and that if she ever tried to rewrite the truth about where I stood in the family, I needed to remember his words. His real words. The ones written with a shaking hand but a steady heart. Reading that letter felt like someone placing a warm hand on my back after years of being left in the cold. I felt seen. I felt claimed. I felt protected by the one person who never turned away from me. But then my eyes moved to the next part of the letter, the part that explained things he never dared to speak while he was alive, the part that made my nerves tighten like someone was slowly pulling a string inside my chest. He wrote that my mother was not always honest about money. He wrote that she kept secrets not just from me but from everyone. He said she had a habit of controlling things by controlling information. And he knew, deep down, that if anything ever happened to him, she would try to divide the family in whatever way kept her in charge. He wrote that he trusted me because I was steady, because I worked without expecting applause, because I carried the family through storms even when no one noticed. He wrote that he saw the good in me, even when others refused to see it. Then he wrote something that made my hands go still. He said he had put certain things under my name long before the truth between him and my mother had even settled. He wrote that he made arrangements quietly because he wanted to make sure I always had a place in this world if the house ever turned cold on me. He said I would understand why one day. And in that moment, sitting on that dusty attic floor, I finally did. There were extra papers attached to the letter just like he said, so I opened them. I sat cross-legged on the wooden boards and laid everything out in the light. There were official papers showing a piece of land in my name. Not a big piece, but enough to matter. Enough to change things. Then I found a bank document with my name printed clearly at the top. It belonged to an account my father had opened when I was young. Money he had saved over years of early mornings and tired evenings. Money my mother knew nothing about. And then there was another paper. A simple slip explaining a savings box reserved under my name at the local bank. A box he protected quietly. A box my mother would never have known existed. For a long moment I just stared at everything laid out in front of me. My name. My father's signature. His quiet loyalty reaching out to me through the years. The truth felt warm and heavy at the same time. Warm because it was finally something real. Heavy because I realized how hard my father worked to protect me from a storm he knew I would one day walk through alone. All those nights he gave me advice in his calm, steady voice. All those mornings he left quietly so he would not wake anyone. All those times he told me to stand tall even when the world tried to push me down. He was preparing me not just for life. He was preparing me for this moment, for this battle, for this truth. And then I understood something deeper, something I had not allowed myself to even imagine before. My mother and brothers had not pushed me aside because they did not want me around. They pushed me aside because they wanted everything for themselves. They wanted control. They wanted possession. They wanted power. And they knew if the family ever had to divide things fairly, I would stand tall in the way. They knew that if the truth ever surfaced, it would shift the whole balance of the family. They wanted to weaken me before I ever knew what was really mine. But it was too late for them. My father had already chosen who he trusted, long before my mother tried to rewrite the family story in her own favor, long before my brothers learned to follow her whispers instead of their own conscience, long before I discovered any of the lies. He had already made his decision. That attic felt like a sanctuary that morning. A place where everything fake fell away. A place where truth had been waiting patiently in the dark for me to arrive. I could almost feel my father's presence. Not in the dramatic way people talk about ghosts, but in a steady, grounded way. Like he was saying, "You finally found what I left for you. You are exactly the man I believed you would be." I gathered the papers slowly, almost reverently, and held them against my chest. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "Now I see it. Now I understand why they wanted to push me out. They wanted everything for themselves. But they were too late. My father already chose his real heir." And as I sat there in the quiet attic, I felt something settle inside me. Not rage, not bitterness, something more powerful, a calm decision, a promise, a line drawn silently in my mind. They wanted to erase me from the family. Now I was going to show them that the truth had my name written all over it. I walked out of that attic with the folder pressed against my chest like it carried the last warm piece of my father that still lived in this world. My footsteps felt different, steadier, heavier, not with sadness but with a strange new calm, like every lie that once suffocated me had finally been pushed aside by a wind that carried only truth. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt the ground settle beneath my feet. No shaking, no confusion. No wondering if I had imagined the disrespect, the rejection, the constant shifting blame. I had lived my whole life trying to understand why my mother looked at me differently, why my brothers treated me like I was an outsider standing at the doorway of a home I helped build. Now I knew, and that knowledge brought a fire that didn't roar or scream. It flickered slow and steady, a quiet flame, controlled, patient, dangerous. When I got home, I didn't slam my door or pace around like a storm. I sat on my porch, The same spot where I had watched years roll by in silence, and this time I let the silence work for me. I replayed everything. The cold words my mother used, the way my brothers stood behind her like shadows, the smirk one of them tried to hide when she told me that the keepsake jewelry was meant for real family. I remembered how they had all looked at me as if I was a stray dog begging to be let in. They thought I was broken when I walked down. They thought their plan had worked. They believed I was walking away defeated, that I would disappear quietly the way they had always wanted. They had no idea I was just beginning. The next morning, while they were probably sitting around the breakfast table celebrating my exit, I drove to the county record's office. The sun wasn't even fully up yet. That's how ready I was. The clerk behind the window, an older woman with glasses hanging low on her nose, asked what records I needed. I told her everything under my name. She typed with the slow, deliberate rhythm of someone who had worked there for 40 years. Then she printed a thin stack and handed it to me. I stepped aside and read through each paper carefully. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Instead, I felt something close to relief. Everything my father left me, the land, the savings, the bank account, was exactly where he placed it, untouched, protected. Mine. Then I asked for another set of records. My mother, my brothers. I wanted the whole picture. I wanted the truth laid out in cold ink and official seals. The clerk raised her eyebrows at the request but handed the documents over without a word. And when I sat back down to look through them, the truth spread open like a wound that had been festering for years. My mother was drowning in debt. Not little debts, not minor bills, deep choking years-long debts, credit cards, loan sharks, mortgages she kept stretching and extending. There were red stamps on several pages that said past due. My brothers weren't any better. One was behind on his car payments. The other had taken out more loans than he could ever hope to repay without selling organs. The house, our childhood home, was one late notice away from foreclosure. And do you know what kept it alive? My money. My overtime, my sacrifices, all the years I worked double shifts and sent money home thinking I was helping my family, not realizing I was just plugging holes in a sinking ship they kept drilling into. Suddenly the puzzle pieces fit. They didn't push me out because they believed I wasn't real family. They pushed me out because they needed every inch of power over that inheritance. They needed the jewelry to sell. They needed the narrative to be in their hands. They needed me gone, emotionally, legally, financially. They wanted my share, my right, my father's trust transferred into their desperate hands. And to do that they tried to break me using the simplest weapon of all, belonging. They attacked the very thing they knew would hurt the most, my place in the family. But they had no idea that my father had once told me to look in that attic. They had no idea he left me the truth that would uproot every one of their lies. I leaned back in my truck outside that record's office, the paper stack sitting on my lap like a blueprint of their downfall. I didn't feel rage. Rage makes you sloppy. I felt strategy. I felt clarity. A stillness settled over me, the kind that comes when a man decides he will no longer fight with emotions, but with truth sharpened to a blade. They thought betrayal made me weak. They thought rejection would send me away with my head down, but I am not the kind of man who swings wildly or shouts in anger. I am the kind of man who watches quietly, thinks deeply, moves slowly, and strikes when the ground is steady beneath him. My revenge would not be loud. It would not be wild. It would not be heated. It would be slow burning, patient, clean. A revenge built on documents, signatures, and proof. A revenge built on the very truth they tried to bury. A revenge that would not require me to raise my voice even once. A revenge that would not need a fight. A revenge made entirely out of their own lies collapsing under the weight of the truth I now held. And as I sat there, watching the sunlight spill across the parking lot, I whispered one sentence into the quiet morning air, a promise I intended to keep. They wanted me gone. Now I'll show them what happens when the man they underestimated finally stands up. My father left me the truth. Now I would use it, inch by inch, step by step, until every lie they ever spoke crumbled to dust at their feet. I drove back to that house the next morning with the same quiet determination that had settled into my bones the moment I left the county office. The truth rode with me in the passenger seat like an invisible companion, solid, undeniable, and heavy enough to change everything. My hands didn't shake on the steering wheel. My heartbeat didn't race. Instead, it moved in a steady rhythm, like a drum announcing a long-awaited arrival. I wasn't returning as the rejected son they thought they had successfully thrown away. I was returning as the man my father trusted, the man they underestimated, the man with proof in his hands and purpose in his steps. When I walked through the front door, they were all in the living room, exactly where I expected them. My brothers stood stiff as fence posts with their arms crossed, their jaws clenched tight as if bracing themselves for another argument. My mother sat in her old wooden chair next to the window, clutching that jewelry box like it was some sacred crown she alone had the right to hold. They looked at me with a mixture of irritation and entitlement, the kind of expression someone gives to a stray dog who keeps coming back to the wrong porch. But I didn't look away. I didn't bow my head. I walked in with a calmness so controlled it felt unfamiliar even to me, and that calmness unsettled them. I saw it immediately in the way my youngest brother shifted his weight and in the way my mother's fingers tightened around the jewelry box. They expected anger, begging, or brokenness. They didn't expect silence sharpened into steel. I stood in the center of the room and looked at all three of them, one by one. Then I spoke, my voice steady and low, carrying none of the pain they had tried to carve into me. I know everything now. My brothers tensed, my mother's eyes narrowed. I continued. My father told me the truth. You tried to push me out. You tried to rewrite my life, but you forgot something very important. I reached inside my jacket, feeling the weight of the envelope, heavy as fate. Paper, I said softly, does not lie. My mother lifted her chin with a cold, dismissive glare. A glare I had seen hundreds of times growing up but never truly understood until now. She looked at me with that same twisted confidence she had always used to keep me small. You have nothing, she said sharply, the venom in her voice cutting through the air. You were never meant to take anything from this family. Her words didn't stab the way they once would have. Instead, they sounded like the last desperate swing of someone who already felt the ground slipping beneath them. I nodded slowly. Is that so? Then I pulled out the documents. I opened the folder carefully, not rushing, letting the silence stretch across the room until it felt like time itself had stopped. Then I placed each document on the coffee table one by one like cards in a winning hand. My father's letter, my birth papers signed only by him, the land deed, the bank account records, the property shares, all legally stamped, all legally binding, all in my name. The reactions came in a wave. My older brother's face went pale first. He took a step back like his legs didn't trust the floor anymore. My youngest brother's mouth fell open, his arrogance draining out of him like water running through cracked fingers. But it was my mother's face, that shifted the deepest. Her eyes, once hard and cold, widened in slow disbelief, the kind that sinks into a person like a stone falling into deep water. The jewelry box in her hand trembled, her knuckles loosened. For the first time in my entire life, I saw fear in her eyes, not fear of me, but fear of the truth she thought she had buried long ago. Father trusted me for a reason, I said quietly. He knew who I was, he knew what I was worth, and he knew I would never destroy this family. I paused, looking each of them in the eye. But you, all of you, tried to destroy me. Silence swallowed the room. Then my youngest brother snapped. He slammed his hand against the wall and shouted, "This is not fair. Mother told us everything was ours." His voice cracked on the last word, like a child, discovering that the storybook he believed in his whole life was just a lie with pretty colors. I looked at him not with anger but with a tired kind of truth. She lied to you, I said. She lied to me. She lied to all of us. And now, I gestured toward the documents spread out like shattered glass. All her lies are falling apart. My mother tried to speak. Her lips moved, but the words refused to come. She opened her mouth again, but her voice cracked. Then she lowered herself into the chair slowly, like the weight of her own actions finally pressed her down. Her eyes looked hollow, not empty from sadness, but from the sudden realization that the power she held for so long had slipped through her fingers in a single moment of exposed truth. The jewelry box slid from her hands and landed softly on her lap, forgotten. That was the moment, right there in that still, breathless room, when everything turned on them. Not because I shouted, not because I fought, but because the truth stood taller than every lie they had built around me. And for the first time in their lives, they had nothing left to say. I stood there in the living room, surrounded by the people who shared my blood, my childhood, my memories, yet none of them truly shared my heart anymore. The air felt thick, almost solid, like the truth I had laid bare was still spreading across the room, settling into the corners, crawling across the walls, filling every space that lies once lived in. My mother sat frozen, the jewelry box resting weakly in her lap, her fingers trembling around the edges. My brothers hovered beside her, stiff, nervous, their faces locked somewhere between shock and disbelief. And there I was, standing in the center like a man who had walked through hell and finally reached the other side with his dignity intact. I held the documents in one hand, not like a weapon, not like a victory flag, but like a reminder of everything they thought they had successfully taken from me. For a moment I simply looked at them, each face, each set of eyes trying to understand what went wrong, where they lost control, how the man they believed they could break came back standing stronger than before. And when I finally spoke, my voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It didn't strain. It was steady, steady enough that even the silence seemed to lean in and listen. "I will not take the jewelry," I said softly. My brothers blinked. My mother's head jerked up slightly, as if she expected I would demand it after everything they'd done. But I didn't, because I didn't need it. I didn't need a box of metal and stones to prove who I was. I didn't need a keepsake to validate my place in a family that tried to erase me. "I do not need it," I continued, my eyes never leaving theirs. "I do not need to prove I am real family. The truth has already done that." Their faces tightened, not because of anger, but because reality was settling in like cold rain. They wanted me desperate. They wanted me begging. They wanted to see me crumble under their lies. But there I was, refusing the one thing they dangled over my head like bait. "I did not fight to hurt you," I told them. "I fought to fulfill my father's wishes, to protect what he trusted me with." I paused, letting those words breathe in the room. "But I also cannot pretend that what you did means nothing." The silence grew heavier. My brothers lowered their heads slightly, whether from shame or fear I couldn't tell. My mother pressed her lips together, the jewelry box shaking again in her lap. So I took a breath, slow and steady, and made my decision clear. I will keep everything my father left under my name, his land, his property, his savings, all of it stays with me. I will not divide it. I will not give you a piece. I let that settle before continuing, my voice still patient, still calm. "You tried to erase me from this family. You tried to take everything from me. Now you must live with the truth instead of the lie you built." My brothers stiffened. I could see the anger rising in their chests like steam from a boiling pot, but none of them dared speak. Not now. Not after everything had been laid bare. Then I turned my eyes to the small brown jewelry box, once the symbol of my rejection, once the excuse to call me less. I stared at it for a long second, not because I wanted it, but because I finally understood what it represented. And then, very calmly, I said the words they never expected to hear. "You can keep the jewelry." My mother's breath caught, my brother's eyes widened, but I didn't leave room for misunderstanding. "Sell it if you want. Use the money to pay off your debts, your loans, your mistakes. Use it to clean the mess you created for yourselves." I lifted my chin slightly. My father gave me something more important than a keepsake. He gave me truth. He gave me proof. And he gave me value you never saw. Their expressions trembled, not because I refused the jewelry, but because I refused to fight. They were waiting for shouting, for breaking things, for anger so loud it rattled the windows. But instead I gave them something more powerful, something colder, something that cuts deeper. Silence. A silence that said I was done trying to earn a place at a table that was built on lies. A silence that said I was walking away with everything they never wanted me to have. A silence that reminded them that I won, not through destruction, but through dignity. My mother finally whispered, her voice thin as paper, "Why are you doing this? Why show mercy after everything?" I looked at her, the woman who raised me, the woman who abandoned me without ever letting me leave, the woman who used silence as a weapon and guilt as a leash. And I answered with a truth that came from a part of me she never managed to break. Because I'm not like you. Her eyes filled with something I couldn't name, regret maybe, fear maybe, or the realization that the son she tried to push away had become a better human being than she ever thought possible. I will not lie to survive, I said gently. I will not steal. I will not twist the truth. I will not become the kind of person who hurts others to protect myself. I will walk away with truth. You can stay here with guilt. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I didn't look back. I walked to the door slowly, my footsteps echoing in a house that no longer felt like mine. I placed my hand on the doorknob, took one last breath and stepped outside. The door closed behind me with a soft, final click, a sound so small, yet it felt like thunder rolling across the sky. It was the sound of a long storm finally ending. It was the sound of peace. And the greatest revenge I could have ever given them was walking away whole while they remained trapped in the wreckage of their own lies. In the weeks that followed, the house remained silent. Not a word from my mother, not a whisper from my brothers. At first the quiet felt heavy, almost uncomfortable, like walking into a room that had once been filled with life but now existed in a frozen frame. I wondered if they were angry, plotting, or simply trying to pretend I had never returned. But slowly, as days turned into nights, the silence began to feel different. It felt like peace, a calm I had not known in decades. My father had trusted me for a reason, and in honoring that trust, I felt a strength that was deeper than any anger, fiercer than any revenge. I had protected what he left behind, but more importantly, I had protected myself. I walked away without wielding punishment. I walked away without carrying bitterness. And in that walking away, I discovered the truest kind of power, the kind that does not need to be shouted, does not need to be claimed, and cannot be stolen. Sometimes I realized, revenge is not a raging fire. Sometimes the most cutting, most lasting revenge is quiet. It is walking away with your head held high, while the people who tried to hurt you are left staring at the undeniable truth of who they really are. That truth is heavier than any anger and sharper than any confrontation. I had given them nothing to fight me with because they had already revealed themselves completely in their own choices, in their lies, and in their desperate attempts to erase me. My silence was the mirror they could not break. Through this entire ordeal, I learned something that shifted everything I thought I knew about family and life. Real family is not decided by jewelry or money. Real family is not measured by who gets the inheritance or who speaks first at the table. Real family is measured by actions, by the honesty that withstands temptation, by love that does not twist itself for greed or control. My father had shown me that. He had placed trust in my hands, knowing I would honor it. That trust was the real inheritance. The things they had chased and hoarded were never the things that mattered. I think of my father often. I think of that dusty attic, the thin slivers of sunlight that illuminated the envelope in my hands, and the letter that saved me. Every time I remember it, I feel grounded. I feel steady. I feel a calm that comes only from knowing that you are exactly who you are meant to be, and that no one else has the power to define you. I see myself in those moments, a man who survived betrayal, a man who walked through fire and came out unburned, stronger in ways that anger or revenge alone could never have taught me. A man who no longer needs the approval of those who could not see his worth. A man who measures himself not by their judgment, but by his own integrity and the life he chooses to lead. My story is not about winning in the ways most people imagine. It is not about riches reclaimed or battles fought. It is about finding truth. And truth is the one thing nobody can ever take from you. Truth is a fortress. Truth is a calm river that flows through every storm. Truth is what remains when the lies have all been exposed. And in embracing that truth, I found something more precious than anything a piece of jewelry or a house or even words of affirmation could ever give. I found peace. Peace with my past, peace with my father's legacy, peace with myself. And that peace is, in the end, the kind of victory that lasts forever, quietly, profoundly, and without fanfare. This is the story I never wanted to tell, but it is the story I needed to live. And I tell it now so that anyone who has ever been pushed aside, lied to, or underestimated knows one thing: the world cannot take your truth away. The world cannot erase the person you were born to be. And in the end, surviving, walking with honor and protecting the truth, that is the kind of triumph no one can ever steal.